as always, guys, welcome. For those of you who are joining for the first time with a childcare chatter with me and the wonderful Tanya. Sorry, you're on this side of my screen. I hope that makes sense to everybody. The wonderful Tanya. So really to sort of kick off and say that what we were going to do tonight is have a bit of an explore of the National Wraparound Childcare Programme now that the local authority handbook has been released by the Department for Education on Friday. In amongst like 5 other announcements that they rolled with on Friday at about first thing in the morning and then all the way through the day. So it's a bit of a manic Friday. And in thinking about the local authority handbook and the guidance that's come out and the Pathfinder programme, it's not even called the Pathfinder programme anymore, it's the Wraparound Childcare Programme. In thinking about all of that, what we realised was that it's actually really hard for me to explain it now because I've been involved in it for so long and I've done so much work behind the scenes through the Out of School Alliance that it's actually quite difficult for me to break it down for people. So I've asked Tanya to join me tonight and we'll sort of take you through the wonderful world of our relationship and the way in which we work together. And she's going to ask me some questions, help us to sort of pull out the bits that a provider might want to ask and also to pick up some of the questions from you guys. So it's kind of like question time for the National Wraparound Childcare Programme. Which is why I'm saying again, guys, if you've got any questions that you want to ask, there is genuinely no such thing as a daft question. At the last OOSA forum, what I realised was that I'm not sure what you want to know about it yet. I'm not sure what you've picked up. I'm not sure what you're still worried about as providers, but that's just because it makes sense to me because I've been working on it for a while now. So Tanya's popped her ex-provider hat, wedged it back on her head. Does it still fit? I feel like it still fits. No, she says it doesn't fit anymore. But what we're going to do is Tanya's going to kind of think of those questions, and I know she's got some prepared because she's mean to me. She's definitely got some that are prepared, and we're just going to sort of take you through that. Any of you who were in this group, which are the OGs of the Childcare Collective, if you want to put it that way, we'll remember that this group literally started in 2020 when we were under loads of different changing regulation for the provision staying open through COVID. And what I used to do is I used to come on and just break that down for you. So it feels a little bit like slipping on getting my feet back under the table, slipping on those slippers and just taking us through this sort of journey of looking at this guidance and breaking it down, making it make sense. So I'll shut up. Shall we just crack on? Tanya, what is your first question?
What is my first question? That is a good question. I think I would like to know, or I'd like you to explain to everyone, it's not really a question about the policy. I'd like you to explain to everyone a little bit about your personal involvement in this, because I know you have done a lot, and I think it's worth just highlighting a little bit about what you've done on behalf of OOSA and on behalf of the sector.
Okay, yeah, tricky one. I always forget this bit, is that because it's so
I know, that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, so when I took over the Out of School Alliance in 2021, when the feedback that I received from members who had stayed members and members who had stopped being members was that the people felt that we weren't doing enough, that because we are an organisation, we work on your behalf, that we as the Out of School Alliance didn't do enough. Didn't do enough advocacy, didn't do enough representation, didn't do enough around that sector voice stuff. And so I felt it was really, really important to start building those relationships within the Department for Education, with Ofsted, etc., wherever I felt that I could get my foot in the door and wedge that door open. So that's what I did. And one of the complaints really was that the Department for Education really didn't understand the sector. They didn't really understand what it meant to be a wraparound childcare provider or an out-of-school provider, and what the difference was in their language, let alone in our language, what the challenges were, why things weren't working, why things weren't going well, etc., etc. So I spent a lot of time explaining, a lot of time building relationships, a lot of time, lots of meetings with the Department for Education. And when they were moving towards the the sort of January this year, really. I spent quite a bit of time thinking about, okay, well, what could be done to support the sector if government wanted to invest, if some of the things that were promised under some short-term prime ministers actually went through. I'll put it as politely as that.
Very good.
And so it's sort of inputted really in terms of what we felt representing you guys, Out of School Alliance felt that we, could make a difference to the sector. And then the spring budget announcement came out, and it was not anything that had been discussed before, really, which was a surprise. I know it was also a bit of a surprise to the DfE team, because it wasn't quite what they tabled, but it was somewhere in between. And anybody who's had any involvement in policy making or any involvement in government at all know that, basically the civil servants, the people who work within the Department of Education, make recommendations, and it might be up here and it might be down there, and there's a raft in between. And then the ministers basically make a decision based on what they want to happen. Once that decision's made, it's then passed back down to the team within the Department for Education to make it happen, which is basically where we've got to. And the team very quickly came to us, within 24 hours, came to us to ask for some help, basically. What did we think? How do we think it might work? What did they need to sort of bear in mind? And since then, I've met with them probably every fortnight in reality to look at the different elements of the programme, what it might look like, some of the things that they might need to think about. And as their team's grown, some of that time I've had to repeat a lot of stuff. And we've gone from talking about things like challenges over language, because if you remember when that announcement came out, it was all this will be schools led. The schools was the first port of call. All of that language was really disconcerting. And I use language as the example of how far the DfE have actually really moved. Part of the, all those conversations that we've had, those meetings, the challenge, them asking like endless questions, us advocating and saying, look, this isn't right, it doesn't read right, it doesn't feel right, you've missed this, what about that? How does that link with this policy? So that has been a huge piece of work that we've undertaken over the last so this has been 6 months. Is that my maths is about right on that? It's about 6 months, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And 6 months is a very, very short time to get a programme like this off the ground. Probably doesn't feel like it. Feels like it should be easy. But in government terms, this is a very short timescale to get stuff off the ground. So we've put a huge amount of resource and energy into it. And I'm actually really pleased that I've seen how far the team have come, how far the guidance have moved in terms of some of the stuff that they were talking about right at the very beginning of the programme. So as part of that steering group, it's not just me who's done that. There's a steering group of people who've inputted into it. But I am really pleased to see that sort of first iteration of the end product of what this policy is going to look like and how it's going to actually positively impact the sector.
Brilliant, well done. So I'm just going to ask you, what's your biggest win? What do you think what have you fought hardest for?
Oh, you should have sent me these before. These are really hard.
I should have.
Anybody who's watching, your questions about me much nicer than these. Okay, biggest win. I'm really thrilled with the minister's introduction to the handbook. If there's one page of that handbook I urge everybody to read, it's the ministerial foreword, where Minister Johnson talks about recognising the part that out of school plays in families' lives, in children's lives, the expertise in the sector, how it's part of, delivered by you guys as brilliant, passionate, enthusiastic individuals. And I think we've got to hold on to that, because we've been saying for years, haven't we, that there's no recognition, there's no value. I think that's come a long way. I think if I had to claim one, I'd claim that one. I
was going to read this to you anyway, but I'm just going to read it out what it says, because I think this was just brilliant. So partway down on the first page, it says, for these families, it's an invaluable support delivered by passionate, experienced professionals who place children at the heart of what they offer. However, then it just goes on to a different point. And then it ends, the final paragraph is, we recognise the immense strengths of the current wraparound sector and want to build upon this to achieve our ambition that no parent should be denied the opportunity to pursue a career. I thought that was when I read that, I just thought, that's got you all over it. I really did. I was like, that is the contribution. So I agree. I think you should be immensely proud that was in a foreword. But anyway, let's not make this a love-in. Let's just get down to a little bit of policy, because otherwise we spend all day saying how well you've done. But genuinely, I think on behalf of the sector, I should just say well done. I can see huge elements of you in, not just in the foreword, but throughout the programme. The amount of times it has gone at great pains to mention how good the existing sector is fantastic. And the second point I think the sector really should be thanking you for is that it is evident, absolutely evident, that this is working in partnership with existing providers and not a school-run policy, which I think when we first all heard this, well, what's that going to mean? And I'd say it's as clear as it absolutely can be in the guidance that this is not meant to be school-run. But anyway, let's just move on to the policy now. Tell us briefly about what it means. What is it that the government has just announced?
So the overall announcement is money. Relative, it's a big amount of money. It's £289 million, and that money is designed to create a programme led by local authorities to improve availability of wraparound childcare for parents who want to access it to work or train. So that it is supporting the existing childcare sufficiency duties placed on local authorities that we all know have been ignored. They focused on early years sufficiency. In fact, one official from the DfE did say to me, yeah, but they've got an early years sufficiency duty. And I was like, no, it's a 0 to 19 sufficiency duty. Anyway, beside the point. What this is about filling the gaps where there is a lack of supply to meet demand. So where we've got no wraparound childcare provision to serve the families at a school community, this programme will support something to set up there. And I say set up there, but it could be on the school site, it could be near to the school site, or it could be in the community, or it could be somewhere else that picks up from there. It could be something entirely different that we haven't worked out yet. So there's an innovation element to the programme as well. It also is about supporting settings where they've got wait lists. So it's about expansion of the existing offer that providers are doing for families. So it's all about meeting unmet demand, really, by improving the supply. And the supply is the market. So it's existing providers, private, voluntary and independent providers, it's childminders. It is school run provision, because in some places that's the right answer. But it is very much around registered childcare, which I think is another win. So the easiest way of sort of seeing this programme is that it's about filling the gaps for families. It's not an affordability programme. It's an availability programme. So it's about making more childcare available for families. So if you think about it really in terms of, in politics terms, this is about more people going to work. More people going to work, more people contributing to the economy. So every pound that they spend on this programme comes right back at them, because it's investing in the economy. So it's a bit of a no-brainer win for the government, but it's also, I think, a no-brainer win for our sector as well.
It's really interesting. I was thinking about that, because you think a lot of people use early years childcare, not necessarily for childcare. So they use nursery maybe for child development, whereas out of school care, I think, is almost entirely for working parents. So it makes you realise actually every penny that you invest into this is going directly back into the economy, it's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's going to be, if we can make that connection in the evaluation of this programme, whoever, don't ask me to do that. If that, through the evaluation, they can show the impact in terms of families going back to working and training, families able to extending their working hours, it will be a massive win, because this is about the economy. as much as I'd love to turn around and say because they value the out of school sector, it wasn't designed in that way. That has come as an aside. This is an economic policy. It's about getting more people back into work by improving the infrastructure. All the stuff we've talked about for years in this sector. It's very much around supporting that side of it by making sure there's more childcare from 8 till 6. And I think it's really important that I mention here, this is a term time only policy. It's not about changing necessarily the profile of delivery for holidays. It's very much around term time childcare from 8 till 6 on or near school sites. But that doesn't mean that the money's going straight to schools. So we'll just nip that one right in the bud, straight off the bat. The money is going into local authorities, and that money will then become available to support. They call it pump priming funding. So to fill the gap between what you think you're getting in and what you're going out, and they'll fill the gap between that. Therefore, it becomes less of a risk for people to try things. And that's why this policy is really good, because it's about supporting the providers to fill the gaps at relatively low risk. Win-win.
Yeah, and I love the fact that they've said that some of it may not be financially viable, but that they're prepared to take that risk and have a little investment in it. I mean, have you got any ideas on how people could do that?
In terms of how people might grow what they're doing and take a bit of a risk? I think that for some providers that have kind of maybe fancied another provision, or they knew that there was a gap somewhere within their community, this is probably a bit of a golden opportunity for them to give that a go. I think that it removes quite a lot of the risk financially for them, because it's 5 terms worth of funding. So you can give it a pretty good, almost, at least a year, an academic year, as an example, as a good go. And also, one of the things that I think is really important to point out here is that, and you've mentioned it, that the DfE and the policy accepts that not all of this is going to work. So it's not like you're going to be expected to pay the money back if you end up closing the provision because it didn't do what you expected it to do. This is a one-off grant. So it's removing some of that risk. And I think we can all start thinking about, if we know about something where there's a gap, or we know that we've got an opportunity to expand, but actually the stretch between what you already do now and what you would need to put in, so fixed costs, really, like another member of staff or another 2 members of staff, for example, rent another room, all of those kind of things that might feel financially unachievable for you to expand, you can apply for funding to remove that cost, so put the funding in, which means that you can go, do you know what, I'm going to give this a go. The programme is very much around seeing if it's that Field of Dreams film. It's perhaps a bit of a tenuous reference, that when Kevin Costner stands in the field and he's creating a baseball stadium in his mind, he's like, if you build it, they will come. It's a little bit like that. Sorry, and you'd know I'd get at least one random reference in. There it was. But the reality of it is that the DfE are okay with providers going, do you know what, I'm going to give this a go, and see if, just by the fact that it's available, parents or families go, do you know what, I could actually do that. I could take more hours at work. I could just put my kids into more childcare. Also a win. I can take more childcare, which means that it just then grows by the nature of it being there. And we know that happens. Sometimes, and you probably did this with some of your early provision that you took on. You went, do you know what, we're going to give this a go, recognizing it might not always work, and see if just by the nature of it being available, we'll get those extra 2 or 3 families in regularly that we know to need to tip over to making to breaking even, and then maybe turning a profit. So I think there's a really big opportunity for us to be creative and think about where those opportunities are that we could fill, and then go, right, we're ready.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think the other thing that I really liked about this piece of funding is it could potentially go much earlier and much later. So for people that work airports is just what sprung into my mind, but people that work near airports, maybe they need atypical hours. Just thinking, whilst you're talking about budgets, could you just give us a little explanation about how, if people are owning their own businesses, how they should price themselves when they are approaching the local authority for funding?
I love this question. I'll tell you how not to price yourselves when you're approaching a local authority. Don't just ask everybody on Facebook what it is that you should do in your local area. Please don't do that. What providers should really do is look at, even if it's rough maths, look at the very real cost of delivering that service and what you need to make out of it as well. Not just the fixed costs, but the variable costs on top of that as well. And I'm trying not to go into too much detail, but definitely think about what it is really going to cost you, including you as a director in your drawings or as a sole trader, your real wage, so that what you can do is go, this is what it's going to cost me over the course of this program to set up, and this is what I predict is going to come in. If you were to do any market research with families, and Tanya, I know we've spoken about this before, if 10 families say they're going to come to you, and you guys will all probably already do this, if 10 families say they're going to come to you on day one and they're going to take 5 days of wraparound care and they're going to all pay halve it, and then probably halve it again, if we're being really honest, just because people say they want it, just so that you'll open it up. And then they're all like, oh, well, you go first. It's a bit like Club Central Conference when I said to you, somebody's got to go first. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do it so that parents go and families go, brilliant, it's there, it's working. No kids got harmed in the making of this out of school club. And so then they kind of go, oh, I'll try it. I'll change. I'll do something different. I'll maybe not put so much pressure on my parents or the kids' grandparents, or maybe just, take an extra day here or there. So be really pessimistic, really negative when you're thinking about how many people are going to use your service, and actually be really pessimistic about how much it is going to cost you. So be thinking about the extra stuff, cost it up by 10%, because we know that everything keeps going up in price. So if you know that your snack in your existing provision costs you, let's just say £50 a week, it definitely doesn't, but say it costs you £50 a week in your existing provision. Think forward in time, knowing that everything costs 10% more in about 3 months' time. Add that in so that you're getting a real representation when you apply for that money of what it is going to cost you, so that you're getting the most out of this program and you're giving it the best chance of being successful. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it really does. And I think you hit on the point that I really wanted you to hit on, which is for owners, directors and managers to really remember to factor in their time. This is not an exercise of it needs to be realistic funding, which is exactly what I think you've said. We've got loads of questions. Should we go through some of those?
I try not to get distracted.
Let's I'll tell you what, you answer one whilst I'm reading the question. So I was just thinking, you mentioned just now that it being registered childcare was another win. Do you want to just talk us through that whilst I read the questions?
So one of the wins, I think, for the sector within the handbook is the very clear statement from the Department for Education that any provision funded through this must be registered with Ofsted. So what they're talking about is regulated childcare, the stuff that fits within the definition of childcare within the Childcare Act 2006, and will be registered with Ofsted as childcare. So there's two parts of that. One is recognising the regulated childcare out of school sector, and the other part is recognising that this doesn't work if parents can't access universal credit and tax-free childcare. So the other thing that will be in any grant that's given to a provider, there are going to be grant conditions, things that you have to do. One of those will be about promoting tax-free childcare and universal credit childcare entitlement, so that families are getting what help they can with the affordability bit as well. But I think that's a huge win. So it's recognising the part that the regulated childcare side of our sector, broad terms, does here. And I think we've yet to see how that's going to play out, where we've got our sports activity provision that are running provision that parents are using as childcare. I think that we're yet to see how that's going to play out. I think we need a bit more discussion around that. I think it's one of the questions I still have that's not quite answered. But I'm really, really positive for our sector about this requirement that it has to be regulated. It has to be registered with Ofsted. And don't forget, if you are applying for a grant, that has a cost associated with it. So you've got to build that cost in. Use a membership as well. I mean, let's chuck it all in at this point. Go on.
Good linking. Well done. It's a really good point. You've been talking about this for a long time, probably not to everyone else, but I know we've had conversations about this. And actually, I think that's another win for you in the guidance that had to be Ofsted registered, because with PAF funding and everything, it has been quite difficult, hasn't it? But let's move on to some questions. I'm just going to do them in the order that they've come up on the screen. Okay. So, will the funding be available for providers that run wraparound care in private schools as well as state schools?
Yeah, because parents need to work.
Are you sure? I thought took that to be state schools only, but I don't know. I was wondering about this.
I don't think it is, but actually, on reflection, I don't think it's clear in the guidance. So it might be that we've got to go and have that conversation. But I think that because this is around filling gaps, parents who make a decision about private school, we can't just assume that's from an affordability perspective and that they don't work or whatever. We can't make those assumptions, because this is about parents who need to access work or training. The Childcare Act responsibility around sufficiency of childcare doesn't just say just for kids who attend state schools. It's for all children, all families. But it's a very good question, and I think I'll go back and just get extra clarity on that one.
I think any question that me and you don't agree on the answer is a particularly good question. So well done, whoever asked that. Okay, the next one. As a result of the cost of living crisis, we're finding parents are reducing sessions and sharing childcare with other parents, as well as parents still working from home. Will the demand be there?
I don't know. It's a very local issue, and this is one of the reasons why, for those of you who do read the guidance, you'll notice that it's really quite broad. So there's no you must, as a local authority, do X, Y, and Z, and you must give it out at £20 per child per head to grow a new provision in terms of the money. They've not. We've fought really hard that this has to be broad, because what is needed in one very local area, one community around a school, could be hugely different to what is needed elsewhere. And you can't take a whole local authority approach. You've got to take a very localized approach. Schools are at the heart of this, but they're not at the heart of this from a delivery perspective. They're at the heart of this from an access to parents perspective. So if you're worried that the demand isn't there in your provision that you operate right now, not sure who the Facebook, it just says Facebook user, I can't address the person directly. Put your name at the end of your comment. So if it is that you're worried about demand in your setting, this programme isn't necessarily going to do anything about that, sadly. It's not a sustainability programme from that perspective. But what it might be is that as a result of the work that the local authorities are going to do in terms of advertising the programme, in terms of talking about tax-free childcare, in terms of lots of different things, and getting the word out there a little bit more, which we're really pleased about, that actually parents might consider it. They might recognise, oh, I didn't realise I could use tax-free childcare for school-age childcare, because everything's geared up around early years. So it might be that whilst there wouldn't necessarily be any direct funding to prop your provision up where parents are making a different choice, it could be that the work that's going in because of this programme actually means that you get that beneficial buoyancy effect and that more families come through to you. But we are recognising, and the DfE have been, this has been flagged time and time again, that what we're seeing in a good number of providers is that actually demand's going down, it's not going up. But it's not a programme that's designed to fill those gaps, unfortunately.
I think that's a really good answer. And I think I like the innovation, which is the part, because I think as a provider, my session's always 3 till 6. I wasn't keen on 3:30 till 4:30 and 4:30 till 6, even though I thought there might be demand there. So I do think that potentially there's a case of having the innovative funding around maybe shorter sessions, and that might tie in. Just thinking at this point, it might be really useful if you could talk to us about the wraparound care lead role and what they will be doing within local authorities, and then we'll come back to the questions.
Okay, so within and this, some of you will be delighted at this, and some of you will be rolling your eyebrows. Rolling your eyebrows? You don't roll your eyebrows. Sorry, roll your eyes. It's been a long weekend. The programme requires each local authority to designate a lead person, a lead officer for wraparound care, at least one. So this might be a new person that they recruit for, but it might be part of somebody else's job. So it could be that one of the early years team gets designated as out of school. So it could be that, I know when I was a development officer, we had people who got specialisms within the team. And actually one of the early years team had a specialism for out of school, and she loved doing some of the out of school work with us. So I can see a scenario where you might have somebody within an early years team in a local authority already who has a bit of a passion for out of school, or a bit of experience, or a bit of capacity, or whatever, and that person becomes nominated as the out of school lead or the wraparound lead within that local authority. But the best part about it is that every local authority must, and it's a must, it's not a should, it's a must, designate a wraparound care lead, and that person is responsible for the delivery of this programme.
And I think what made me just think about them is that they are also responsible for promoting wraparound care in the local area, which is when you were talking, I was like, oh, actually, yeah, so hopefully that will help broaden the market.
Yeah, there's a clear part of this programme which is around stimulating demand, which again has always sat within the childcare sufficiency duty, but it's got kind of lost. So there is this phrase called market management that the local authority has a responsibility for. It used to be done through the family information services and through the kind of the work that the teams did, but it has dropped off. But that role is kind of being pushed back through this notion of stimulating demand through advertising, through the work that local authorities doing, through promoting the programme, and also, you know, taking lessons from the existing expertise that we've got within the sector about how to do that, or if it's possible, and trying stuff out as well. You know, I keep saying there's this innovation bit that nobody's been able to pin down. I'm like, what do you want to see from innovation? You know, we've been doing this for how long? I can't think of a new thing. But, you know, that's for the sector. It's a huge opportunity for the sector to say, do you know what? I've always wanted to try this. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It really is. In preparation for the next question, I'm just going to ask you to explain the 3 types of funding. I'm not going to ask you to tell us what they are. I'll tell you what they are. So there's capacity funding, programme funding, and capital funding. Can you just describe what each of those 3 things are?
Yeah, so the 289 million is, there's a chunk that's come out of it for the evaluation of the whole programme, and that's really important. It's not because government want to top slice everything, you know, that's a whole different conversation, but this is really important for showing that the investment was well worth it when we cut to the end of it, because that means we might get more money. So there's a chunk that's come out of it for the evaluation. Then what they've done is they've used a formula based on where they suspect the biggest gaps are, and they've turned that into a formula and worked out how much money each local authority is going to get. And the first part of that, the first allocation, is called capacity funding. And that capacity funding is about local authorities building their capacity to deliver this whole programme, to work with providers, to provide them with the support, to identify where the gaps are in the market, to do all of that stuff, to pay for the resourcing that is needed, so to pay for the wraparound member of staff, to do all of that. So the capacity funding is a tiny bit, and that is going to the local authorities in advance of the main programme funding, which will be available for delivery, if you like, of actually getting it out to settings from September 2024, which feels like a long time away, but I promise you it's not. And that programme funding is the biggest part of this programme. And that is the money that goes out to through grants to providers to do the settings, to run the settings, to open the settings, to plug those gaps. The other part of this is an additional 100 million. And that additional 100 million is capital funding. Now, the capital funding is a shared pot with early years. And this is a bit I'm a bit twitchy about. So I'm a bit twitchy about it because I don't really know yet how they're planning on distributing that, whether it's weighted to early years, whether it's 50-50 split. I don't know. And we haven't seen the guidance yet for that, excuse me. So until we've seen that, I don't really want to say too much about it, but the intention behind that capital funding is that will be used where you've got restrictions in terms of premises. So, I mean, I hate to say, it could potentially fund building works, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be enough money to do that sort of work. But it could be around resources. One of the things in the guidance is around where you've got children who need specialist equipment for supporting disabled children's access to childcare. That might be allowable through the capital route, but there is a chunk of that, and it's additional money. So it's 289 million plus a chunk of 100 million capital funding as well. But we haven't seen the guidance. I've not even had an inkling of that guidance that's come through yet, so I don't want to say too much on that. But that's the third strand of the funding under this programme. So it's a huge investment, really.
It really is. So that ties us in nicely to our next question.
Yay.
Could transport be made available for smaller schools to attend out-of-school clubs nearby?
Yes. Short answer for me, yes. So if you, for example, run a provision, let's just use rurality. So in rural schools, it's often they're smaller schools. You might find that there's just generally less demand to make an out-of-school club viable. So what you might, or what you as a provider might offer, is to get transport arrangements in place from a couple of other rural schools locally to all come together in one place and run childcare from there. And that would make it really viable, really vibrant, a brilliant place to be for the business and for the kids. So this funding could be used to support transport costs. I don't think you'll be able to buy a minibus from this because that would be a significant amount of capital funding and an asset. But I think that if you were to say, right, for us to have a long-term relationship with a transport company to do the pickup, or to the cost of just paying staff to go and do that would be unachievable, then that you could probably apply for a grant to leverage those costs to see if it works. So, but again, it's about filling those gaps, really, financially speaking.
A short answer, and still a short answer. Well done. So next one, we've got an out-of-school forum with Manchester City Council on the 6th of November, but the wraparound programme isn't on the agenda. Should I push for a response/view from them, or is it too soon? And do councils know what is happening?
The councils have had the handbook since Friday. So yeah, push for an answer. Go after them. Make yourself no, but I'm sorry, but it's an out of school forum. So it's a forum for you guys, this sector. And I think it's really important actually that you do put that on the agenda and say, we really want to know what you think. It was I mean, to be fair to the council, they probably sent the agenda around before. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here. I think they probably would have sent the agenda around and set the date before this handbook came out on Friday, or before they knew it was coming out. But by the 6th of November, I think they'll have had time to read it. And they also will know what their allocations are, so they'll know what their funding allocation is. It doesn't mean they'll know what they're going to do with it necessarily, but I think I would push to put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I would also say make sure you read the handbook yourself before the meeting, because that way you're going to know, you will know as much as they do, but they will obviously have that little bit of thought about the detail behind it. Okay, next question. Will every out of school club receive the grant, i.e. to employ additional staff to expand?
No. So this isn't just here's an amount of money, carve it up and give a bit to every provider kind of a program. This will be where you, as an out of school provider, if you have got an expansion desire and the demand to go with it and can make it happen, you will be able to apply through whatever mechanism the local authority puts in place to apply for some money to leverage the cost of making that expansion happen. So they're not going to just go, oh, we've got 100 out of school clubs in our local authority, let's take that total money, chop it up, give it out to them, and then they will expand. I don't think they'll get away with that, because that's definitely not in the spirit of the program. This is if you have got expansion demand, so you've got a wait list, you're ready, you can expand, but you just need to be able to afford to buy. I nearly said you don't buy staff, you employ staff. So if you've got that demand there, you want to employ a member of staff, but you're nervous about it because you're not sure that if you employ the member of staff, then those families will actually come through. Well, you can bid to the local authority as part of this process to say, okay, for the next academic year, this new member of staff is going to cost me £20,000, for sake of argument. I think I'm going to bring in, say, £10,000, just to make the maths easy, of that in income from families. I would like you to fund the other £10,000. That is the kinds of things that this programme will be able to do. But just to clarify, I don't know exactly how any local authority is planning on doing this yet. And each of them have got free rein, really, to come up with a scheme that works for them locally. But they have to do the work beforehand. So this is something, sorry, slightly off track, but related. So the local authorities have to submit a delivery plan to the Department for Education before that money is released. So they have to kind of go, right, I know where the gaps roughly are. We recognise that what we're going to do about those is we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to set up a grant scheme, we're going to do some advertising, we're going to engage with our local providers, offer them the opportunity to come in, whatever that'll be. The DfE go, yeah, sounds like a reasonable plan, here's your money. They're not just going to get a load of money that's chucked into their budget to do as they will. So it is quite a controlled programme from that perspective. They've got to have a plan. They've got to know why they're doing what they're doing with this money. So I'm quite reassured by that. But sadly, no, it's not going to just get a nice big fat cheque from the government to every out of school provision. It'd be nice.
No, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? Actually, at this point, I wonder whether it might be worth you just talking through the impact on existing providers and provision versus new provision, because actually quite a lot of this funding is targeted at where there isn't something already in place.
Yeah, I think that on this one, I think that it's going to be more impactful on those who are ready to expand, ready to do something new, ready to fill a gap. Now, that might be somebody completely new to the sector who just wants to set up for the first time and fill that gap. Or it might be that an existing provider is recognising there's a gap to fill and is going for it with this provision. So for the, in terms of impact for the sector, I think impact for those of you who are already operating is that you have the opportunity to expand if that's what you want to do, and you can see a good gap there. I think the other impact that we'll see, as I mentioned, is in terms of just general awareness of what we do. I think that's going to be a positive impact. This is where I take my OOSA hat off, because this is a bad thing for the Out of School Alliance, but a good thing for the sector. So for you guys as a sector, local authorities they'll have to provide you with some support. And that might not be the support that you think you want. It might be that you think you want access to, I don't know, specialist advice. Well, I'll put my OOSA hat back on and say, we will still do that for you. Your local authorities are going to be focused on delivering this programme, but they will, in reality, probably be offering some training that you will be able to access They might be putting some new resources together. They might be holding networking events. Lots of the stuff that I think we used to have and that has been missing for a while, I think local authorities are going to start reintroducing through this programme. So I think overall that is a positive impact for our existing providers. I'd be very surprised if they could justify doing a training event, let's just say running safeguarding training through this programme, just for those who are setting up and expanding, because that seems like a really silly thing to do. I don't know how they justify that in terms of wider impact. So for the sector, I think it's really good because that level of sort of generic support is going to finally be there again from local authorities. So I think that's going to be a real positive impact as well.
I agree. I think it's been so long since the sector's had good support from the local authority. We've all forgotten what it looks like. Right, we've got some more questions, so let's move through these. If I want to grow my provision, it has to make a profit, but that is so scorned in our sector. Financial sustainability is absolutely key for me. It's not a question, but a comment, an observation.
I love that comment. That's one of my
favourite
comments. Yeah, you know I would. Because profit is not a dirty word. And unless we start using the language, then we're never going to change anything. And I'm not going to say it. Everybody knows what I'm going to say, and there'll be some chortling in the background.
Go on. Some people might be new.
Okay, so for the newbies around, I'm going to have it tattooed on my head at one point. What I keep saying is that nothing changes if nothing changes. We have to start changing the way in which we talk about the sector so that internally we talk differently about it, internal to us as a sector, but also externally. So I was commenting, Tanya, I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but I realised that quite recently I haven't heard anybody do that us and them conversation about the sports activity providers versus the regulated wraparound providers. I haven't heard that in a while, and I realise I've been banging on about it since I took over at the Out of School Alliance, that parents don't care. They just want childcare that works for them. It's only us that care because it's unfair. The system isn't a level playing field. But until we start or stop just worrying about it and talking about it all the time, we're not focusing on us, we're focusing on the negative stuff. So I've noticed that as a change. But until I feel like until we said parents don't care, we care, but parents don't care, and they're the consumer, they're the people who pay the bills. So we've just got to show them that our provision is the right one for them. So something started to change. The way in which we spoke about it internally then influenced what happens externally. And I think this is really key, is that until we start saying, no, it's not charity, this isn't my hobby, this is my business, and I am entitled to earn a living from it, those parents aren't going to work for free, mostly. Some of them are going to volunteer, of course, but mostly those parents are going to do a job that they're paid for. You are doing a job that you should be paid for, and for most businesses, that means you have to make a surplus. And my business has to make a surplus. It has to make more money than I spend keeping it going so that I can get paid, so that I can keep the roof above my head, so that I can pay for all the bits and bobs that I like to do outside of work. It's okay to earn money in this sector. And until we start thinking differently about it, nothing's inside our own sector. Nothing's going to change on the outside. And I know that's really hard and it takes time, but we've got to kind of kick our own selves up the bum about it a little bit and say, no, it's okay. We are okay to make profit. Use surplus if that word makes you feel uncomfortable. If it gives you the ick, don't say profit, just say surplus. Even a charity has to make surplus because it's about reserves. And lots of our providers use those reserves that they had, if they had any, to keep going through COVID. If you didn't have that profit, which is what it is, if you didn't have that profit, you wouldn't have been able to do that. Is that okay profit? Because we reinvested it in the kids that we serve? No, it's just profit. It doesn't matter what you use it for. And I'm going to shut up on that one because it is one of my pet peeves. But I'm desperate to know who's asked that now, because it's yes, financial sustainability is absolutely key. And this programme does have the opportunity to allow you to take a risk in setting something up that benefits your business in the long term. and I use business, it could be you're a charity, it could be you're a sole trader, it could be whatever, I don't really mind, but everything we do has to run in a business-like fashion. That means we have to generate surplus, profit, whatever, so we can back up those reserves. And reserves are important in case we have to shut something, in case we have to make people redundant, unexpected bills. There's so many reasons why surplus is important, but I promised I'd shut up about it, and I am now.
Okay, let me stop you there. So yeah, I fundamentally agree with that. I think it's a real shame that people in the sector think that profit is a dirty, I can't remember what the word is, but a dirty word. It's necessary, and the whole purpose of having a business is to make a profit. That's, if you look up the definition of a business, it is something that tries to generate a profit. One quick challenge for you: if nothing ever changes, when are you going to change your phrase?
I've got about 6 now, haven't I? I've got about 6 things that I trot out every now and again. But yeah, I mean, maybe it will change. Maybe I need to stuck that down when stuff keeps changing.
Anyway, let's move on to another question. So someone's made an observation that they have got clubs in private schools with waiting lists, so they need to expand. So we definitely need to check out on that. We've got a couple of questions about SEND, which is not a surprise. So will the funding support children with SEND to access the clubs?
Again, this is one that we haven't nailed down exactly what the offer is going to be, because the DfE are very, very clear that this isn't about funding one child to attend one provision. This is about building some resilience, if you like, within new and expanded provision. But that doesn't actually solve the issue that we've got, that to take one child in your setting, sometimes you need to have money put in to support that child. It's one of those tricky questions that we haven't nailed down entirely. And I think the stock answer that the DfE go to is that that local authorities need to assess what level of unmet demand there is for children with SEN or SEND, and what the barriers are for them accessing provision, whether that's mainstream or specialist provision. I mean, we can be fairly confident that we can give them the answers, but again, we're back to that. We can't have a generalised view on this. It has to be local. It has to be specific. I would be surprised if, in the long term, there is not some support for children with SEN to access out of school provision in terms of providing additional staffing. But I would argue that not every child with an EHCP in a school setting will necessarily need a one-to-one additional member of staff. It might be that by way of expanding your staffing to add an additional member of staff, you can take actually 3 more kids or 4 more kids, but their focus is on that one child. I think there's lots of ways in which we can sell that as it comes down to it, but there isn't a black and white answer for that one, which is why we haven't been able to properly nail it down, what it really means. There is a part in the handbook which is around inclusivity, however, and I'm again quite proud of that bit.
Good. I think you're right. This is a bit that still needs a little bit of work. What I would say to any provider is start to think about what your challenges are, so that when you get asked by your local authority, that you've got them ready and you've thought about them. Because if you are struggling to get the finances, then this is a good opportunity for you to talk about them. Right, let's move on. So got a nice comment here, Rebekah, about your bold business course from Adam, saying that you covered this area. I think it's profitability. He covered profitability and had changed the way that he looked at his business to make it profitable. So I think that's a really nice shout out for your bold business course.
Thanks.
Another observation here: the difficulty we will have if we are an EY registered provider is staffing. Where are they?
They're hiding under my desk, which is my joke. Everybody's like, "Oh, I'm really struggling to recruit." I'm like, "Yeah, me too." It's a tough one. And so moving slightly away from the Wraparound Childcare programme, and we've been working on our sort of response to the government's response to the early years EYFS consultation, is that actually we're quite disappointed that the call that we made through the EYFS consultation for a disapplication of the staffing qualifications for before and after school providers for children who have not yet started school but are attending an early years provision was ignored. Within the EYFS consultation, there was a potential option around off-peak hours. That's not the language that they use. I can't remember what the language is now, but where it's sort of before and end of the day, where your numbers are lower, to allow providers, so where your numbers would be lower, sorry, in traditional early years nursery provision, to allow providers to have some flex on the qualification, because they're recognising that it's it's outside of the focused education development inputs that almost all children will be getting. And I was really optimistic that if that went through, we could argue that those qualifications for before and after school providers would be disapplied. So you would just have the sort of the school-aged qualification requirement of no qualified staff would apply for those kids who are, say, 3 and 4 who've not yet started reception, but remove the qualification requirements because they've had their education input. So you don't need an early years educator qualification for the before and after school bit, which is why we've got the exemption for kids who are in reception class now. I'm really annoyed, if I'm being really honest, I'm really annoyed that the way in which the government appear to have decided which ones are going to go through and which aren't is to go, how many votes did it get from people? Well, of course, you're only going to get 1 from the Out of School Alliance. You know, you might get a few from the sector, but it's never going to, we're never going to be able to outweigh the voting, if you like, or the numbers of people who are in that sector who are going to recognise that for very young children, that would not be a good thing. So it's a bit like, as I said to you, Tanya, when I was cross about it and I typed you an email, I said it's a bit like asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. Of course, they're going to say, no, that's a bad idea. It's not a high school popularity contest. But the reality of it is that unless we deal with those bits of quirks within the regulation, if full-time early years providers can't get staff to work full-time that are qualified, how on earth are we in the wraparound care side going to be able to get a fully qualified early years trained staff team to work with, say, you know, 5, 3 and 4-year-olds who come to our provision maybe 3 days a week? You know, it's hard enough to get people to come and work in our industry, let alone people who've got a qualification that is really useful but isn't directly related to what we do. So I'm really frustrated about that, to be honest. Probably because we've had so many wins, but also because I don't feel like it was necessarily really considered. But yeah, I hear you. I don't know what the answer is on that one. I really don't. You know, it is a difficulty. We will keep fighting about it. We'll keep calling for it to be looked at. It can be dealt with secondary legislation, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue to change, but we've got to get agreement to change it. I'm also really annoyed that they didn't give us our own version of the framework as well. They gave childminders one. Brilliant. I think it's really important. But let's have one for us as well. What about us? What about us? So I'll continue fighting on that one.
I think what that whole little section has just shown is your in-depth knowledge of the EYFS. I know that I love how you can just pull any element out, any element of it out just like that. So yeah, well done for that. And I think for providers, that just goes to show that when you tell people to fill in these questionnaires, that they need to be filling them in, because I think you had highlighted that we all needed to fill that in, and it sounds like maybe none of us did. So I think that's a sort of little learning for everybody. A little learning for everybody there. I'm just wondering about the staffing as well. I think, again, just highlight that to your local authority, because the local authorities, when they're coming around and understanding what the barriers are, that's something that everybody needs to be highlighting. Is if you're struggling to recruit and that is a barrier to the number of children coming through, let them know, because it's going to be something that they will be interested in and potentially have to help you with. Mm-hmm. Anyway, right, let's move on to another question. So, Rebekah, when would you expect local authorities to start providing information to out-of-school clubs?
How long's a piece of string? I think what we've got when we're setting our expectations for local authorities, what we need to be really clear about is that for some of them, they have nobody within their local authority team or resourcing who is able to, in terms of capacity or able to, in terms of understanding, provide that information at the moment. My expectation would be now, but that's my expectation because I live and breathe this, and I don't as such have to juggle all of that sort of stuff. I think it would be reasonable for local authorities to be providing information to out-of-school providers in their area about what they're planning on doing, how they're going to be doing it, you know, sharing that bit of a vision really. Realistically, January, probably, I mean, give them some time to work it out, give them some time to do some modelling. They will need to go back to the Department for Education to get their funding, so they'll need to have a bit of a plan. Realistically, in terms of what activity they're intending to do, somewhere in the spring. But my expectation would be that they should have at least started this. They should have at least had a thought process. It's not like this is new. It's been around for 6 months. You knew it was coming. You just didn't know quite, you know, what the programme handbook would require you to do. You know, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect something to come out of your local authority by Christmas. I don't think that's really unreasonable, but detail, it depends on what information you're expecting them to provide you with. If it's just sort of information about the programme, they can do that now because it's there. If it's information about what activity they are going to do to fill those gaps and how you can work with them, then definitely spring to summer next year.
Depends. So just looking at the key dates here on in the programme. So it's saying that in November, local authorities should start planning and preparation for the rollout of the national programme, including recruitment, if not already commenced. And then in December, they should receive their first capacity funding payment, which means that they can then go ahead and employ their wraparound staff member, and they need to start mapping provision and preparing for delivery. And then in January, the guidance for schools is published and an updated handbook is published. So you would imagine there is going to be a reasonable amount of activity between now and the end of year, certainly between now and the end of January. And then the delivery plan gets submitted in February. So local authorities need to know by February very clearly what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have another question. We are in a perfect position to offer apprenticeships at a lower level and support the childcare sector as a whole. Are there apprenticeship services which we can talk to about this, or would LA be better?
That's a good question. There are definitely apprenticeship services, as in there are training providers who have access to, for example, the level 2 in play work. We've got a new level 2 in play work. I'm not entirely sure about funding and all of that sort of stuff. So I wouldn't want to say too much about what that looks like, but there is a level 2 apprenticeship framework that is valid and is available. That you're, you know, if you know there's a local college or a local training provider or whoever who can deliver that, or who would normally deliver childcare quals, I would get in touch with them and ask them. I wouldn't be able to say whether or not local authorities would know more at this point about that. I would suspect not. In terms of sort of lower level apprenticeships to support the whole childcare sector, are you thinking about just play work for out of school provision, or are you thinking early years educator qualifications? What kind of, I suppose that's the question really, is what kind of qualifications are you thinking of? We will be doing a workforce piece over the next few months. So I might be in a better position to answer that a bit more fully, you know, in the next month or so, about what's available, how that feeds in. And there is still the two main conversations that we need to have, well, three really, three main conversations that we need to have about this programme at a national level is around SEND and support for kids and families with impairment, around quality, and around workforce. So there are three key elements that are yet in my head that are yet not nailed down, that I've still got fairly significant questions about, and that's SEND support, workforce and quality. So that's a bit of a dodge in terms of answering that question, but depends on what you mean by apprenticeships in terms of what field. And yes, but yeah, I completely agree. You know, it'd be great if we had an apprenticeship progression route. I think it would be mega. It's something that I think we can really support the sector with, engaging with, and support people coming through the sector. But it's got to be we can't just offer apprenticeships. We've got to offer a progression route, and it's got to be tied into the wider workforce. But as ever was the case, this again is not one of those new things, is it? But I'm going to get it in because Tanya's not directly asked me yet. I am so pleased because within the programme handbook, it talks about play-based, child-led delivery. Play-based, child-led makes me happy. That's it, I'm done. I didn't talk too much about it, but yeah, play-based, child-led, it's in there.
It was amazing to see that in there. Absolutely, genuinely amazing. And that was another win. That was another Rebekah win, as far as I was concerned. I really, exactly those words, play-based and child-led. It was fantastic to see that in there. I'm just going to, before we move on to the other questions, talk to you about quality, because I know that's the other thing that you're quite interested in. Tell us what you were a little bit disappointed about the quality and how it's stated in the guidance. Tell us why.
Yeah. I'm actually pleased it's in there because my first real I think I've balls this up moment actually came when I went quite firm on the quality angle quite early in this process with Ruth Jesson-Smith, the new director of the programme. And I know this is not something I haven't said to her face to face, so I'm not just, you know, just damaging any confidences here, but I was like, your face when I said it, and I was hard on you about quality, and that we had to have a line about quality, because there was no point in setting up provision that is really poor quality, because it'll just decimate the whole sector. And her face was an absolute picture. She was like, oh my God, why did I ask this woman to talk about any of this? So we've come to quite some agreement on quality, and it's a demonstrated factor of how far the team have moved. So to have a statement that quality provision is important, I'm thrilled about. What it says, I'm less thrilled about, but I was asked to review this guidance before it came out, so about 3 weeks ago. I was asked to look at the Wraparound Programme Handbook for local authorities, and I suggested that they took out the line on quality because I didn't feel that it was anything above what we would expect of an Ofsted registered provider in terms of basic standards, basic application of basic practice. I didn't think it was a representation of high quality. And I didn't think also that it was me or the DfE that should be stating what quality looks like. I think it should be the sector tells us what quality looks like. However, my advocacy for it to be taken out, the DfE said, no, we have decided that it needs to stay in because we think it's so important for this programme to have quality as an embedded principle within the programme. And what is really clear is that, yes, the primary objective of this is around availability of childcare. There are two secondary objectives. The first secondary objective is around improved access to things like take-up, improved take-up of parents using tax-free childcare and things like that, so that provision becomes more affordable for families. different argument. But the third part of that is actually around quality, that what we want is to build quality in from the start. That's why it's still something that I'm yet to kind of get behind entirely, because I just don't think I think it's a big move from the DfE to say, this is what we think quality looks like for a sector they've had no interest in the last 10 years. But I'm rolling with it because it's really, really, really important that we start talking about it, we start thinking about it, and we start articulating what we mean by quality, and we embed it in this programme from the start. This is not about poor quality provision being funded by the government to set up for people who look after other people's kids. It's got to be high quality, and it's got to be embedded from the start. So I am disappointed that, we didn't have a conversation earlier about it, but I'm really positive that it's in there, it's been embedded, it's, they've come a long way on it. So yeah.
I think they really have, and I think you're absolutely right to think it's important, because it would be very easy to do a race to the bottom with this, and actually that's what they've stopped. So we're not doing that now, and actually we are now going to accept that this is our standard level of quality, which is the standards as they stand, and from here we can only go up. So I think that's a fantastic thing that you've managed to get, another fantastic thing that you've managed to get in. Right, we've got 2 more questions left. So what safeguards are going to be in place to ensure that local authorities will use the money for what it's meant for and not for absorbing it to deal with their growing debts?
Oh, Tracy, this is where you're asking those good questions. So because of the speed in which the programme has had to get rolled out, and because of the technicality with ring fencing any money within local authority budgets, no, so Tracy's put sorry in the chat, don't worry, it's a really good question. So because of all of the technicality and the restrictions that would put local authorities under in terms of how they design a bespoke local programme, the DfE decided not to ring fence the money. So it isn't ring fenced, but the safeguard that is in there is that the local authorities have to submit this action plan detailing what it is they're going to do, how they're going to do it, to release their first tranche of funding. And then they have to have a much more nuanced and developed understanding of what actions they're actually going to take to fill the gaps, and they will be held accountable to that action plan. So that's the built-in safeguard in its most simplistic terms. So it's quite technical in the background in terms of how government funds local authorities. It's not got a strict ring fence around it. It's not like a 6-foot impenetrable garden fence. It's more like a picket fence that goes all the way around the outside. There's some gaps, there's some potential ways of it getting snuck away and reabsorbed, but the safeguards are that there's at least half a fence around it. There is this action plan that basically gets signed off by the Department for Education, and that is embedded within the memorandum of understanding that local authorities then get, and the local authority lead for wraparound is held accountable for that. And they hold the chief officer accountable as well. So in a roundabout way, there are some safeguards, but then, if they put a proper ring-fenced amount within the budgets, it would be so strictly managed. It would have to go to exec boards in most councils to get any spend approved. So it makes it really difficult to design a programme that works at speed to do that. And trust me, for governments, this is really fast, really fast.
Can I just say, we haven't asked you a question you can't answer yet. Well done.
Well,
So there's
I've got this really long, complicated history of working in local authorities as a strategic lead, having handled ring-fence budgets. They're a nightmare.
Yeah, well,
But,
all this has come together at the right time for you. There seems to be some sort of chat going on here about what questions providers could be asking local authorities to start the relationship early. And it makes me think about a question that we got asked online on Facebook earlier, which is how should individuals be interacting with local authorities now to make sure that they're best placed to optimise the funding when it comes out?
If you know who your local authority contact for wraparound is already, I would send them an email or get in touch with them and say to them, we're lodging our interest now to say that we know we've got an expansion opportunity, or we're interested to work with you to deliver this program. So that's a really easy one to do. If you know that you've got a person there, I'm just going to Kerry Lee from York as an example, because I know her. She always gets, she's, bless her heart, she might even be online, but one of them, Kerry, own up if you're here, but Kerry from York, she's designated wraparound lead. Any providers in York would know already to get in touch with her, or Debbie as well. You know, all of that, they would know the channels to feed that information in. If you know that, again, I just use Tracy as an example. Tracy's already knows who to contact. I know she's already been doing that. I would, you know, there's nothing wrong with sending an email and saying, hello, we're here, we've got a really good handle on what's happening, we've got this great big wait list, or whatever it is. Expansion opportunities in your existing provision is a quick win for a local authority under this programme. So I would definitely get those sort of lodged, if you like, with, if you know there's a direct person. The second part, and I've said this a couple of times, that it is likely that once all the local authorities have nominated a wraparound person in their, you know, as a contact, as a lead person, so that's probably going to be in the spring, then that will become available. I won't say any more on how that might become available, but the likelihood is that if we find out that we've got a local authority rep, we will note that who those people are, because sometimes the hardest part is navigating through a local authority website to identify who that right person is to speak to. The other thing that you can do is to ring up or email your local family information service. So almost all local authorities will still have an active FIS. And if you email them or ring them up, you might have to be quite persistent. Ask them who it is has responsibility for wraparound care, and ask for their email address so that you can get in touch with them because you have a query. They may come back and go, oh, we don't know, or they'll put you in touch with somebody who says that's not me, but at least you've got a name that is related from your FIS to childcare, and the likelihood is that this will sit within a childcare directorate or a childcare team within the local authority in some way, shape or form. The other thing I'll just say is that the very wonderful Tanya Petherick has been working on for us a provider information sheet with loads of top tips and some kind of like myth busting and some questions that are answered and a guide through the wraparound care programme. So Tanya's been working on that for us. So thank you for doing that. But also as part of that, I know there's some answers to some of these questions around how can we get ready? What sort of things do we need to consider? So that'll be out as soon as we can get it out, really, won't it, Tanya?
Yeah, yes, it will. I thought you said when, but you said won't.
Oh, sorry, no.
When, yeah.
when
as soon as we can, but definitely by the end of this week. Hopefully in the next couple of days.
So we'll share that.
Yeah. Just to add to the Family Information Service, through my work as Club Central, I have created myself a database of Family Information Service contacts, and I found the websites. Actually, if you go onto a website, search childcare, you will generally find a list of contacts on there. So yeah, don't be afraid to do that. It's normally a generic email address, but I'd say in my experience of emailing those email addresses, people do generally come back to you. They're quite friendly. So I would definitely be looking at doing that. And I think if I was still a provider, I would definitely be reaching out, because even if I didn't have my own ideas on how I wanted to approach this expansion, I would be very keen in letting the local authority know that I would be interested in any opportunities as they were arising. Right, Rebekah, we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. I've still got pages of questions, but I wonder whether we just get you to answer one probably last question, which I think we've finished all the ones on here. How pleased or worried do you think providers should be following this announcement? Do you think they should be mostly pleased or mostly worried or somewhere in between?
Mostly pleased. There's lots of reasons for that, and I've probably mentioned quite a lot of them. Mostly pleased because we have got attention. and significant investment. You know, we bandy these numbers around like, you know, 289 million. That's a lot of money. Like, if you look at, I've got it on my desk, under a book called The Master Plan. We've got the grant allocations, maximum grant allocations for each local authority. It's been published, so it's, you know, it's freely available information around what each local authority is going to get in terms of capacity funding, programme funding, and then provisional onward funding. We've got some local authorities that are going to receive £7.5 million. That's Birmingham, by the way, because it's one of the highest amounts. So I, you know, looking at this, going, you know, that's a significant amount of money. Norfolk, 7.4 million. Lancashire, 6.2 million. So that's a huge amount of money. Even when you break down that 289 million into, you know, what that means at a local level, there are big differences between local authorities though. So I think the fact that it's that level of investment when we have got so many other financial pressures on the country's finances at the moment, I think that's a huge step in the right direction. And I think we have a responsibility as a sector to do all that we can to kind of push local authorities to work with us to make this work, because in some cases this is going to be relatively low risk, giving it a go. And now that I am hugely positive about, because where else do you get the opportunity to remove quite a lot of financial risk and be given permission to give something a go in business, with it being okay for it not to work out, that you're testing stuff. There's a big element to this program that's around testing, and I think that's the exciting bit. Yeah, of course it makes me feel nervous, and it would make me feel nervous as a provider to give something a go, because you wouldn't do it if you didn't want it to work out, because you're taking on relationships with families, you're taking on relationships with kids, you're taking staff on and things like that. I think that all the wins we've talked about, they're positives. So, you know, the balance is definitely on the positive side. With anything there's risk. We've got a risk that we get a change of government. I'm not saying that that'll be a bad thing or a good thing. I don't think it will change anything with this programme in reality, because I think it's too much of a headline investment. We've got risks that all the same risks that we have within our businesses are not going to go away because government are putting money in. We have the opportunity to use this to start stuff up in the right way. So for those of you who've kind of inherited provision, you know, you worked in it and then you became the manager and suddenly you own this provision, you get the opportunity to start something from scratch and to start it really, really well. So to take all the learnings that you've had and apply it to something new and do it really well. That's a huge opportunity. We've got opportunities to leverage this programme to get a workforce strategy, to talk about, you know, nationally recognised quality framework. And I'm not saying quality assurance, be really clear on that, but a set of standards. We've got the opportunity to change our inspection programme. Potentially, I'm not saying that is happening, it's not. But I think there's the opportunity to open the door to a conversation about why the regulatory system doesn't work. So huge numbers of positives that can come off the back of this. So I was hedging my bets to start with, but actually the more I talk about it, the more I think it is hugely on that positive side of a real good step forward for us. Yeah, risks. Of course there's risks. There's risk with everything. There's a risk that, you know, we don't manage to set up much that's sustainable, because what we thought we knew at the beginning of this programme is that those gaps, those small gaps that exist now, are because they're unviable, that the commercial market hasn't filled them for a reason. There could be a risk that from that investment perspective, it doesn't sort of pay off in the long term. But having seen, you know, that journey and followed it through, I still just think we've got loads of opportunities here that I'm quite excited about. And I think that we as a sector kind of need to get behind this and really push to make it work, so that we can show that it's worth it. We can show that for this 289 million that they're putting in, they're getting that back in spades. I think there was at Club Central, there was a discussion about a learning point around the holiday activities and food programme. I think it was James Hempsell said there was some research that came out of Birmingham University, talking about the fact that for investment in half, it was £10 of the return on investment was 1 in 10. So for every pound that was invested, it kind of leveraged £10 of savings for investment in supporting those families. And I'd love it if we could work on a ROI measure, return on investment measure for this programme, but I don't know how you'd measure that, which is why you shouldn't leave me in charge of evaluation. But I think, overall, it's so overwhelmingly positive. Loads of questions. And yes, there's going to be loads of stuff that, you guys are going to have more questions about. There's going to be stuff that we have yet to explore. There's going to be stuff that we haven't thought about, which is why it's so important that we keep having these conversations and we keep having the questions raised, because it makes sense to me. I can see it, I can see it kind of in the big picture. I'm very good at the big picture. I'm not so great at the detail. So sometimes, you guys need to keep asking me a question and say, I don't understand this, or have you thought about, because it could easily be that we haven't. And that could be something that is one of those unintended consequences, or something we just haven't worked through. So yeah, I think overall, after having said all of that, we're definitely on the positive end of the scale. What about you? What do you
think? Everything I've read, I think it's huge. I think it's neutral to positive. So I think neutral, it may not affect some providers positively or negatively. If you're not particularly interested in growing, I don't think it will have a negative impact. And I think for quite a long time, there was quite a lot of fear that it would have a negative impact. I think that's been taken away, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I think just the presence of the Wraparound Care lead, the very fact they're there, is going to make a small positive impact for absolutely everybody. And I think for providers who are really keen to engage with it, the impact could be really positive. So overall, I'm not really genuinely seeing anything that makes me think, ooh, this looks a little bit worrying. So on that note, let's just give a very final word to schools, because I know it's never far from providers' minds, school taking over provision. Do you think this will lead to schools taking over provision?
I don't think that this programme will negatively impact that. So I don't think we'll see more, because this programme isn't set up to mess with what's already there. So if there is a good case for expansion, the local authority will be in there. They will be working with the existing provider to look at how to make that expansion happen, which I think is a protective factor. I think it would be quite hard for a school to turn around to a local authority and say, do you know what, we've got a problem with our budget, so we're going to just take that over. I think the local authority will be much more of a barrier for that happening, especially if the school are thinking, great, I can get some money to leverage this to make it happen, it'll be more profitable. I genuinely think that local authority acting as a barrier, taking more of an interest, will be a protective factor here. I think that what schools don't like is they don't like risk. They don't like the idea that this could cost them money. So what we know is that in most cases, schools are taking over provision that has been running for a long time that is successful, not provision right at the very beginning, because it's a risk. So even with investment from the government to bridge that gap, I still think this is an opportunity for the sector, the PVI sector, not for schools, unless they cannot find a PVI provider to go in and run it. Now, I can almost hear providers going, yeah, but they'll just let us set it up, they'll let us take the money, and then they'll take it over. But we face that risk every day. I don't think that should be a barrier for us setting up provision well, tips on how to do that in the user legal pack. But it's true. I'm not going to give it away for free because we paid a lot of money to get that advice. So, it's in the, that stuff's available to members. There's a whole fact sheet around protecting your business, and there's a fact sheet around setting it up well with the right structures in place that give you the best protection. Now is the time to do that work. But if you're setting up and you want to give yourself the best chance, you get to try again. Do you know what I mean? You get to build really good relationships with the school from the start so that you become invaluable. Now, I know that there's no guarantees in all of this. I can hear you all going, yeah, but, and I know the stories, and I'm not minimizing that as a risk. Because I hear it directly from people who've lost their businesses, and I'm not minimizing it at all. But this is not about schools delivering provision. Where it is the right fit to solve the problem, great, let the schools do it. Where it is too risky for us as private commercial providers, great, let the schools do it. Where it's a good opportunity for us to do something really well, let's get in there, let's do it. Let's do it really well, in partnership, in collaboration, and celebrate all of that so that we're building those protective factors as much as we can. But please don't think that this is just a load of money that's going to get carved out to schools to take over provision. That isn't the case. It's the opportunity to do things really, really well from the start, with some of that risk that's been removed by getting some money to get it off the ground and get it off the ground well.
I think my radar of schools taking over provision is really attuned. And when I first read this, I genuinely didn't see anything in there that made me think this is a backdoor way to try and get schools to take over. It really doesn't feel like that at all. So, yeah, if schools are already planning on taking over, will they? Maybe. But it doesn't change anything, I don't think, and it does bring a lot of opportunities. Someone's asked about where we can see the published grant applications. I was going to put a note in the comments, but because we're not on Facebook, we can't. But I guess we can pop into Facebook after, can't we, and pop it on there afterwards.
And also, I know it's in your handy information sheet. You put all the links in there, haven't you?
That's a really good point. I have very well done that. I'm very organised. I think we probably need to bring this to an end, don't we?
Yeah,
we can I've still got lots of questions, but we probably.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think, we can talk about the opportunities. We can talk about all the stuff that's in the handbook. We've covered loads and loads of ground. That we've done, I think, as much as we can in terms of sharing the messages, pointing out where the handbook is. There's a press release we've done. Tanya has worked really hard on our behalf to create a bit of an analysis report as well. So she's dragging us kicking and screaming into the very professional world of press releases and getting, a bit of analysis done and just, really helping. So thank you so much, Tanya, for that. It's hugely important. But that will all become released tomorrow. We will put it up on the website, and the newsletter will be out early next week, but I'll probably do a bit of a mail flash with it all anyway. But what it is a bit of an analysis report. So where people can't wade their way through an hour and a half of the recording, and they just want to read the highlights and where we think the positives are, where we think that some of the problems might be. That's all contained within that as well. So lots of pieces of work are happening to kind of educate, to share those messages. But I keep saying it, don't I? Ask us the questions. Don't think that there's anything as a daft question, because it could just be the thing that unlocks a new conversation. And if you're thinking it, loads of other people will be as well.
I'm just wondering whether we could, if we still got people watching, or is it just me and you?
Yeah, no, we've still got 12. There's 12 hardcore people watching us at the end.
I'm just wondering whether those 12 on a scale of 1 to 10 could just pop something in the comments to tell us how optimistic they're feeling. So,
that's a good one.
1 for not very optimistic and 10 for feeling quite optimistic about this bit of funding. Yeah, and whilst they do that, we'll just wrap up, shall we?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well done. You evidently know what you're talking about. You evidently have got a very, very good handle on this. It's to me extremely clear that your hand is running through that guidance. And as I said at the beginning, I genuinely think the sector owes you a huge debt of gratitude, really, because I think you have personally put a huge amount into this, and you should be very proud of what you've done.
Oh, thank you. I think what I always say, I recognise that I've got a really privileged position, and I genuinely take this sort of this advocacy role, the voice of the sector stuff, really, really seriously, and also it's a huge opportunity for us. So I'm, really have kind of taken that on board. So yes, it's been a huge amount of work. Yes, it's been really hard work. It's been really frustrating at times, but mostly I can see the work being paid off in terms of this guidance. I'm just watching, people coming in feeling a little bit positive. It's that is enough. And I also, I suppose, I've said this in a number of posts recently, is that if it wasn't for the Out School Alliance members sticking with us, in really tough times, to be perfectly honest, and sticking with us, I can't do this work, because I'd have to go and get another job. That's the long and short of it, And I also, one of my messages, I suppose, is that yes, if you don't access the website, or you don't use the resources, or you don't even read the newsletter, why not? But that's okay, because it's not you. But I thank you to every single one of you who've stuck with us, because your contributions mean that I can do this work. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that we're funded by government or we're supported in other different ways. We're not. We're purely member funded led. So every single membership payment that comes through, that helps us to do this work. So that, I don't need you to say thank you, really, I suppose, for the sector. I want you to stick with us, keep sticking with us, and we'll do more of this good stuff. Keep telling us, keep being, you feed in the voice, I'll be the mouthpiece. I think it's in my skill set. We keep joking about it, but the reality of it is that this is your work as the Out of School Alliance members. This is the culmination of it. I just sit in front of it, and I'm very ably supported by brilliant people, and I think that's the piece, really, is this is your membership, this is what it's working for, this is us coming together as a sector to make this sort of stuff happen. It's just taking a big and squishing it into a tight funnel at the top. So it's a well done to all of you guys for making it happen and giving me the ammunition to kind of take that to the government and say, no, it's really important that you stick with the existing providers, because they're brilliant, and they are brilliant.
Anyone who's watching you will see your animation shine through when you're saying that. We need to let these people go. They must be starving. They haven't eaten their dinner already.
So, right, thanks guys so much for sticking with us. We will make this recording available somehow on the Out of School Alliance website or somewhere. We've got a YouTube channel, I think. I don't know quite where we'll put it, but we'll find somewhere for it to go. But it'll stay here in the Childcare Collective as well. Thank you so much for joining in, guys. Thank you for all of the questions. Thank you for all the feedback. Lovely to see so many of you feeling a little bit more positive. Take that positivity with you into session tomorrow. Enjoy it with the kids. So we're going to start our stream now and say good night to you all.
Bye.